Record. Hi, Phil. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Yehuda. How are you?
I'm fine. You see, I am outside in the first station. It's quiet because of the COVID,
It's very
uh,
nice.
b- but very nice. Some people are having a walk,
And I'm
and
at home. I'm here in
okay,
Suradasa,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
which is, for anyone who doesn't know, between Jerusalem and Bet Shemesh, and right
yeah,
next to the Green Line. So
okay,
I live in an Israeli town inside the Green Line, but with Palestinian towns at the bottom of the hill. And so we have excellent relations here. And from that has come ideas that we're formulating together of how to live in this land together, where the green line doesn't matter, that separation, we don't need separations between Israelis and Palestinians in this area. And maybe that's a vision for the future for everybody in this land.
yeah, and it's already the reality here in Jerusalem. I'm living in Jerusalem. And we are working together, Jews and Arabs, and I'm living in Katamon, which is near Beit Safafa, which was a Palestinian village and now is a Jerusalem neighborhood, and it has kept its character of Arab village, and it's very nice to be there too. And so we mingle every day, and there is no green line and no separation. So we met to speak about Israeli-Palestinian federalism. So I wanted to. We spoke about that before, and I would like to hear once more your what is your position, how you see it. Maybe there is some differences between us. It would be interesting.
Sure. Okay, so for me, the most important issue is the idea of separating into two states is something that has been discussed for many years, and it didn't get anywhere for all sorts of political reasons. But based on the experience that I have here, I think it's partly because there are lots of people that don't actually want to be separated from each other, and it would be a kind of lose-lose. Okay, to have to cut the land up and say, okay, this is for Israelis and that is for Palestinians, and build a wall and two separate states, then we can't continue operating together. And also, we don't have access to the other half of the land. And
Yeah,
I think the reality is that both peoples feel connected to all of the land. And so if we only end up having half of it each, we're not getting everything that we want. The Palestinians feel very connected to places like Haifa and Jaffa, and we have connections to many of the places in the West Bank or Judea Samaria, depending on what you call it. Lots of the biblical locations, and Hebron, the place where the forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were buried. That's a very important location, and the idea to separate and divide the land uh, is not perhaps what we really want to do. And maybe that's why the two-state solution never actually happened, and it
yeah,
opens up a window for doing something much better. But if it's not two states, then some people would say, okay, so it's going to be one state. Okay, we're all going to live together in one state. And that would be a binational state because we have two different peoples in this land. And we're not trying to become one nation, one people. We want to remain two different nations. We don't want to assimilate with each other. We want to preserve our cultures and identities, but we want to share one land. And so to go to being one state, one democratic state where we're all voting on things together, I don't think is the right solution either. So if we were to try to do a one state uh, where everything is equal and we're all in the same boat together, then that means we're going to have to compete with each other for influence. and also possibly over demographics. The situation would change if one day there are more Arabs in this land than Jews, and that would change the political positions, and that would make the Jews afraid of their future, and we don't want to be in a situation where we have to compete. So if it's not going to be two states and it's not going to be one state, there are options in between one state and two states, which are various federal arrangements. And the
Okay.
easiest way to think of it is two states in one state kind of thing. Okay, it means that for some things we act like we're one state, which could be the economy, for example. If we benefit from working together, then we should keep the economy connected. And we
Yes.
already have one currency, the shekel, and I don't think there's any need, or I haven't heard of anyone suggesting that the Palestinians need to create their own separate currency. So currency and economy, we should be like we're one state. But there are other things where we should be like two states, because Jews want to be self-governing, and Palestinians are an independent people who deserve to be self-governing too. And so therefore, you can create a situation where we have two governments all within one land, but each government is for the particular specific people. So a government for the Jews, a government for the Palestinians, and there would need to be some kind of structure, a government perhaps, which would be federal, because there will be some things that we need to operate together. The economy, as I already mentioned, but things like environment and infrastructure, roads, electricity, water. It's very hard to divide these things, and why would we want to divide these things in this land? So those should be managed centrally, federally. And also I would suggest security is something that is going to need to be managed centrally. We already have security coordination between Israelis and Palestinians, and it has been very important across the years to avoid violence in this land, and that is something we should continue. So these are the basic principles of the way I see a possible federal future. The key thing is that there are some things where we will be together, and there will be some things where we will be separate.
Do you agree with my formulation that there should be a self-determination, national self-determination for both people inside the federation?
Yes, I see that there are two peoples, two nations who need self-determination and self-governance, but there also needs to be
you see what I mean?
Together.
Self-determination meaning self-rule.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think, based on the Jewish Israelis that I know, the idea of us being no longer self-ruling would be a very scary prospect for most Israeli Jews, and therefore, yeah, we don't need to do that. Jews can be self-governing, and Palestinians can be self-governing, and yet we can live in this land together at the same time as being self-governing. So sure, I completely agree with you there.
Okay. You see, I have a phone call. It's a problem. Yeah. Yeah. So we were on about this question of self-determination.
Mm-hmm.
And to have self-determination, I think that it means that the federation should be defined as supranational.
Okay,
meaning that there is a level above the nations that are recognized as nations, and who are not going to form one new nation, Israeli Palestinian one or something mixed.
Correct. Okay. Absolutely. We're not trying to form one nation. We stay as two nations, but the nature of exactly where the sovereignty should be isn't something totally clear to me yet. As I understand it, the two basic models of federalism are a federation where the sovereignty is at the top and there are states below it. So the United States of America is an example where it's a one country, one federal country, and these states like California and Texas are below that federal level, and the sovereignty is above. Whereas the
Yeah.
alternative is a commonwealth where the sovereignty is below, such as in the European Union, where France and Germany are sovereign nations within a collective umbrella that is the
Yeah.
European Union. Now, for me, I don't personally want to get too troubled by whether this should be a federation or a confederation,
Hmm.
because people argue about that quite a lot. And for
Yeah.
me, what's much more important is to work out what things we want to do together and what things we want to do separately. And I get the feeling it's going to be a mixture, somewhere a hybrid of federation and confederation. Because, for
Hmm.
example, I've already said that one currency, and I would also suggest one army. Okay, the idea of having more than one army in this land opens the door to all sorts of very bad possible future scenarios. Okay, the idea of
Yeah.
having two armies in this land means one day, heaven forbid, they would actually fight each other, and that would be a disaster. So I would strongly suggest, I'm happy for anybody to try to tell me otherwise if they feel differently, but most people I've spoken to suggest, yes, one army is what we should have here. And maybe it needs to be a collective federal army. Exactly what we're going to do, we don't know, but it should be one army. Okay. However, when it comes to representation at the United Nations, it seems as though we need two seats at the United Nations because we are two peoples, and neither one of the peoples is willing to merge their voice on the international stage with the other people. And so, if we just focus on those two points alone, then one army is normally typical of a federation. If you have a federation like the United States or Australia, there's one army. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have a confederation like the European Union, then each of the constituent states can have their own army. And
Because
so,
one army mean one sovereign,
yes, now
and this. Mhm.
for me, sovereignty is, I don't know whether sovereignty is about the army or whether it's about how many parliaments there are or whether it's about how many seats there are at the UN. So for me,
Mhm.
I'm saying I think there should be one army, but two seats at the UN and two parliaments. Now, I don't know whether you want to call that a federation or a confederation. It's something in between. If it were a federation, it would generally be one army, one seat at the UN, and one government. If it was a
Yeah.
confederation, it would be many armies, many seats at the UN, and many parliaments. Okay, so
Yes.
I'm
That's
suggesting
why
something
I
in
prefer.
between.
Uh-huh. That's why I prefer to call it a supranational federation, meaning that
Yeah.
there is a recognition of the fact that there are different nations. They can really have a voice outside in the UN or in the international instances and organizations. Um, but having one
So
army means one sovereign, and one sovereign, this sovereign has to be supranational. So
okay, so
the stress is more on one federal state, which is composed of subunities. It can be two states or even more with other national groups too, that have their
okay,
own autonomy.
so let's not just try to decide exactly what we're going to call it because I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
aware, for example, that a lot of the Palestinians that I work with are more keen, more open to the idea of a confederation than a federation at the moment. Okay,
Yeah,
it's very important for them to feel independent. And if we talk about placing sovereignty above, then they feel potentially threatened by it, that maybe they're not going to be truly independent. And actually, I've spoken to quite a lot of Israelis that are also afraid of the federal layer being too strong. Because if, for
hmm,
example, we were talking about that the Israeli government is down below and the Palestinian government is down below, and there's something above it, which is supranational and federal, some Israelis will feel, wow, hang on, we don't want this government above us that can maybe tell us what to do the way that the bureaucrats in Belgium sometimes
Yeah,
give orders to the countries within the European Union. And so
true.
they don't feel sovereign enough anymore. So it's something that is a sensitive issue. So personally for me, I choose not to worry about exactly where the sovereignty is. Okay. I also choose not to worry about demographics either, because I believe if we design this correctly, then we shouldn't need to worry about demographics or sovereignty as long as each people gets to rule themselves in all the matters that count for that people. Then they'll be happy in this land. But at the same time, we've got to create some institutions or structure above that keeps us together. We do not want a possibility of a
Okay.
divorce in this land. The idea of
Yeah.
Brexit happening here would be a disaster. So if we're
Yeah.
going to
You know.
form an arrangement to get together in this land and stop competing, stop seeing each other as rivals in this land, to see each other as complementary instead of contradictory, then we want to build it and make it strong and robust so that it can't fall
Yeah.
apart the first
So the
time some problem happens.
so it's that's what is more maybe important to call it a federation, because then you stress the fact that the common state, the overarching state is the federal one.
Yes, I agree with you.
But I
Federation,
agree with you that there are elements of
exactly.
socialism or confederalism, and
Yes, correct.
because we
The
want to
reason,
all
yeah, the reason I
self-determination.
choose not to focus on the word is because, as I said, Palestinians are keener on confederation so far that I've spoken to. Whereas, as you say, there are a lot of people that would like the idea of federation because it's much stronger. And also, history teaches us that federations succeed, whereas usually confederations don't succeed. They either
Yeah,
fall apart or they advance to becoming federations. Now, however, I don't actually think that's what we want in this land. I don't think we want the idea in the European Union, for example, of ever closer union. The idea that bit by bit we're going to get closer and closer until effectively we become one country at the end. Okay, I think we want to be one land, but I don't think we want to be one country where we all merge everything together. We are different
yeah.
and we want to stay different. And so the challenge is to preserve the differences that we want to preserve, whilst at the same time building a structure where we can be together on all the things that we want to be together. And we need to make it strong, and that's the aim. It's not just supposed to be a step along the way to becoming a federation later. Maybe one day that is what we
Mm.
want. But right now, according to everybody I've spoken to, it's not what we want at the moment. Okay, we
I want
want
to
to
tell you
be
something about this question of federation and confederation. I hear many Palestinians or people that want a confederation saying we Palestinians need first to be independent, and then we can connect as equals and so on.
yes.
But I think it's not realistic. It's not the way the story is working and going on just now. Because we tried for more than 20 years to have two states. And if the two-state solution is not working, and the Confederation wants first to have two states, so it won't work either. So we have to recognize we need another approach, I think, that to look at the situation now, not to being simply occupation, but being already a kind of federation which is unequal, very unequal, and that we have to, by small steps, turn the Palestinian autonomy into something close to a state minus. And we have to, on the other side, Israelis have to give up upon their absolute sovereignty, the control of all the state. And this won't be easy, but I think that's by small step and by building trust, it will be possible.
Yeah.
And I want to answer to the one problem you raised.
Mhm.
That is the fear of a too strong federal state.
Mhm.
And the answer to that is a principle of subsidiarity, meaning that you give the less authority to I do say samkhuyot in English. You give less um, field of action to the higher level. You give the most to the lower levels. So there is a lot of personal autonomy, of community economy, local autonomy, regional autonomy, national autonomy, I meant. And what is left for the federation is just protecting the external borders, connecting and balancing between the two national states, having a fair right of veto or a representation of the both nations, and dealing with like you said, with the roads and all the common networks of energy and a fair sharing of the natural resources. So there is no reason to be afraid of that. There is no reason to be afraid that there will be a system of real sharing and justice at the top level that will prevent one side to dominate the other. There is no reason to be afraid, because all the cultural field, the language, the education, all the national symbols and everything will be dealt with by the national states at the national level.
Okay,
So
so
I think that the
let me
federation
answer.
should be, yeah.
Let me answer,
Okay,
because
okay.
you covered a
Go
lot
ahead.
of ground, and basically I pretty much agree with everything you said. First of all, I think the easiest way is to start with the reality at the moment and then make it better, because some of the things are already working. We've already got security coordination, and we've already got an infrastructure that is in many ways connected. There is one electricity infrastructure, one water infrastructure, and we shouldn't have to try
Correct.
to separate to create two states first. I've heard this argument suggested by
Mm-hmm.
some diplomats that what's required for the Palestinians to choose to be in a confederation is that, first of all, that they would need to be fully independent first for a time, and only then would they feel strong enough and independent enough to join in a confederation with Israel. But the problem with that is that it effectively means you have to build the Berlin Wall before you can tear it back down again. And that's a great
Yeah.
shame. If we've got some things that are already working, then let's not rip them up just on point of principle, just so that we can separate first and then totally freely decide to come back together again. Much better is to start with what's already working, but at the same time fix what isn't working. So, for example, the occupation is a military occupation of a people. That is completely not the future that we want in this land. It's
Yeah.
fundamentally unequal, and it does not give the Palestinians the human rights and civilian rights that they deserve. So the idea of the federal future that we see is that the army's job will not be to be meddling in internal affairs for anybody. The army's job will be to protect our collective external border, and it will be the job of police forces to police the situation internally, and that would mean that in Israeli towns there would be Israeli police forces, and in Palestinian towns there would be Palestinian police forces, and there would also be federal police for handling situations where Israelis and Palestinians are meeting in open areas. And so, yes, we do not need to separate first in order to build this. So we should start with what we already have. Okay, it's much easier than trying to tear everything up and start from scratch. But we do need to fix the problems. There are many problems that need to be improved for everybody's benefit. If everybody's happy in this land, things will be much better for everybody. But as you said, you talked about the role of the federal layer. I agree with you. From my perspective, the federal layer, the job of the federal layer should be to protect synergies and autonomies. It should not be to be able to govern and overrule either the Israeli people or the Palestinian people. The job of the federal layer is to provide a structure for all the things that we choose to do together. And some of those things we choose are to have independencies from each other. So therefore, the job of the federal layer is to preserve all the things that we want to be together, but also preserve our rights to be separate in certain things that we want to be separate. So that's the way I would describe it, which is pretty much, I think, exactly what you said.
Yeah. Now, how do you see the ways, the steps to go to reach this federation?
I would suggest the first thing is to make people aware of this possibility. There's far too many people at the moment who haven't considered the possibility of Israeli-Palestinian federalism. We've been going for so many years on the principle of the two-state solution, and the international community has always been saying again and again and again, we stand committed to the two-state solution. And so nobody's really been talking about the other possibilities. Now, I said that another possibility is a one-state solution, and I hope we don't go that way either, because I don't think that's going to give us what we need. We do need autonomies. Even within Israel, you see that there are different kinds of Israelis that don't want the same things as each other. The ultra-Orthodox and the secular Jews really do not want the same things, and they are asking for different rules in their different towns. And federalism is exactly the way to create something like that, so that every different kind of people can get rules that work for them. And so you don't have to end up fighting for a one-size-fits-all approach, where therefore the ultra-Orthodox will be fighting for Torah-driven law, okay, which would work for them, but would not work for secular Jews, and wouldn't work for Muslims and Christians in this land, okay. And in the same way, the secular Jews might be fighting for a purely secular system, but that might not work for religious traditional people in this land. So the idea of federalism is a solution not only to the problems between Israelis and Palestinians, but it could also be a solution to the internal problems within Israelis and within Palestinians.
So you suggest that should be legal autonomies inside Israel of different Jewish tribes.
Yes. Only up to a certain level.
It is existing, in fact, but not recognized. That's the fact. So we should begin to recognize the reality.
Exactly.
And what about many people don't know that the Sharia belongs to the Israeli legal system. There are Sharia tribunals and in Israel, so there is already this autonomy and cultural autonomy for the Palestinian citizen of Israel. Well, how do you see the role of the Israeli Arabs, how they are called in Israel by Jews, or how they call themselves as Palestinian Arabs in Israel? How do you see their role in this question of federalism?
I think the idea is that everybody should enjoy self-determination and should be free to call themselves whatever they want to and govern themselves locally according to their local customs and religious or secular laws. But the key thing to make it clear is that none of those people get to then enforce those rules on anybody else who's not part of that community. And so if we've talked about Sharia law or Torah law, halachic law, then we need to make it very clear to anyone who's listening, don't worry you are not going to be subject suddenly to halachic law or Sharia law if you are not a halachic or Sharia person. Okay, that is the thing we've got to get away from, this idea that it's all going to be one set of rules that applies to everybody, because then we're terrified to hear these words talked about and being made official and legal, because then, well, that's giving them strength, and then who knows what these people might then start being able to enforce those rules upon us all. And the whole point is, no, we make the structure strong to guarantee nobody can do that to anybody else.
That's a great fear. That's a great fear among the secular Israelis.
Absolutely.
That if we speak about religion and recognize Sharia autonomy of different communities, then they will impose on everyone. And that's why there is another principle I think that we should stress. It is non-territoriality of the states or of the communities. I mean, the communities being defined by their population, by people, meaning that a religious Orthodox could live anywhere and live according to, or in a neighborhood or a village in a region where there is a majority of secular people, and yet he will follow his own laws, his own legal customs. So
they should be free to do
the same
that.
same for the Palestinians. I mean, because I think that what is going on in the territories now in Area C, for example, is that where there are Jews, this is already Israel, even if annexation has not been officially done, and where there are Arabs, it is already Palestine. Because even in Area C, the Bedouins and Palestinian villages received all their receive services from the PA. So it's already existing, this kind of non-territoriality, aterritoriality, if you want, of the people, of the groups, of the nations. And, so that's the important point. And I think that if we understand that, nobody will be afraid.
Yeah,
because it's kind of personal autonomy. You take your community, your belonging where you want. If you are alone, or if you are in a group, or if you are with your village or your community or a neighborhood, and it's working like this, no problem.
Yeah, I see Area C as an example of what the way it could be, although it's got to be made equal, and at the moment it's not equal.
Yeah.
Israelis that live in Area C enjoy full rights, civilian rights. The Palestinians that live in Area C do not. That has got to be fixed. But I have no problem whatsoever with the fact that there are Jewish towns and Palestinian towns next to each other, sometimes even sharing the same name. There are two different Tekoas, okay, a Jewish Tekoa and an Arab Tekoa, and that's great. And if there were to be economic relations between those, then it's a win-win for everybody. And we have that in some other areas. I think in the Galilee and of Jews and Arabs coexisting, and they keep their separate towns. And yes, they should each get to define, according to their own rules, how they want to live within their towns. And so everybody should get to live according to what works for them, and not in any way be allowed to try to enforce those on other people that don't want those rules.
Yeah. Now tell me, there is one point which is more difficult, is the question of security, question of the army. The police, I think, is more simple. Overall, we can say that Palestinians ask for equality and freedom of movement in general, and Jews are very caring about security, their own security. They are afraid of losing their security and being dominated later. Or invaded by other Arab states. So it seems to me that to equality could be reached. Not very. It won't be very difficult because most Israelis agree that they don't want to dominate another people, and they want the other people to be treated equally. But they are afraid that if they are equal, then they will dominate them. Then Jews will lose their security. So one answer would be. So the question is about the army. Should the army be controlled by Jews exclusively, or should it be shared equally, or something else? What is your?
So my answer would be: at the moment already, the Israeli army is not solely Jews. There are Arabs that participate in the army, Bedouin. There are Druze, and yes, there should be no reason why we couldn't participate jointly. But I understand fully that Jews would be afraid of it. As you say, Jews are primarily concerned about security. And yes, whatever path we choose, it should not jeopardize security. Security is good for us all in this land. Opening the door to any kind of violence, but internally within amongst Jews, internally amongst Palestinians, or between Jews and Palestinians, none of that is good. We want to make it strong. We want to guarantee autonomies and synergies like the benefits of working together, but also we want to guarantee security. And I'm well aware that for a Jewish audience, if this doesn't guarantee security, then it's a no-go. Okay, we won't be able to sell it to them. So it's got to be strong, and Jews cannot feel threatened by this. And similarly, I've already mentioned, Jews currently do feel threatened about the demographic possible future in this land. We need to fix that. We need to make it clear in advance that no, okay, you don't need to worry about that. Whatever happens, Jews will be self-governing, and Palestinians will be self-governing. It doesn't matter how many of each there are in this land. They are two peoples that will be guaranteed self-determination and self-governance forever, according to this structure. And we will also guarantee security, and we will work together. We will not open the door to any possibilities where we just, oh, okay, now we'll just trust each other and we'll just all lay down our weapons and everything will be fine. No, we live in the real world, and we need to make sure it's going to be fine. And we also need to make sure that we're safe from our neighbors outside, even though, as it happens, there's some very good developments in that direction recently. And maybe this can be part of peace in the entire Middle East. But we need to sort things out between Jews and Palestinians in this land. That is our job. And we now have an opportunity to do so, because lots and lots of people are saying, okay, the two-state solution, it looks like it's just not going to happen. And so people are now asking, all right, what is going to happen? And so we've got to put this out there now and say, here's a possibility that would be better than two states. It could give us all what we need. Okay, we all get to live in the entirety of the land, but with all the things that we need, meaning our self-determination, meaning our security, prosperity, dignity, freedom, and also, by the way, it's very important to say that the Jewish law of return, that we can bring Jews who need to come to live in Israel, that is something that we struggled thousands of years to be able to have a situation, a homeland where Jews can be safe. We can't jeopardize that either. But in the same way, we need to understand also there are Palestinians that live outside this land and that would want to come home, and we should be able to allow that to happen and welcome it without being afraid that we're going to be overrun. And that means we've got to structure this in a way so that if many Palestinians from other countries in the area did come back to this land, there's no reason for Jews to be threatened by it. Now, I would suggest, though, that would be managed in a controlled fashion on both peoples. Because if you have millions of people all of a sudden arriving in a land that places a huge strain on resources. So we should work together on that to agree what's the right way of handling it. But at the same time, we must guarantee that those rights are going to be fulfilled. These are national aspirations, and they are part of what we've fought for so many years for these rights, and nothing we should build should be a threat to that. We should actually fulfill the national aspirations, but in a way that is not one nation against the other. Okay. We do not have to be competing. If we build it correctly, we will not jeopardize security, we will not jeopardize our rights, we will actually guarantee those rights for both peoples for eternity in this land. That's the aim.
Okay. I can suggest a way to manage. It's important to enter the details a little bit, I think, too. To manage the problem of the right of return and law of return. It seems that it would be important to have some partition of the land, not a national one, not national territories and not internal political borders, but districts, like cantons or districts, that reflect the reality on the ground. There are areas, area A and areas in Galilee or in where there are 100% Arabs living together, Palestinian Arabs. There are a lot of areas where nearly 100% of the population is Jewish, and you have many areas and towns that are mixed. So we could say that there are three kinds of districts, mixed districts, like Jerusalem, Haifa, Jaffa, and so on. And you have Jewish districts and Palestinian districts. And then the right of return and the law of return will apply at the national level. Each people will integrate its own nationals in his own area. Mm-hmm. So nobody will feel suddenly, occupied or with a huge wave of immigrants that don't belong and that change the status quo of their area and life. And it's true between religious and seculars. I mean, today we can't live in Nebrak or in Mea Shearim if one is not keeping the halacha, is not religious, and people that are secular don't want religious people to come and take over their neighborhood too. So there's a balance to find between collective rights and individual human rights.
I completely agree.
I think this is possible. And then in the mixed districts, the mixed town, there should be an agreement to have like 50-50 or kind of agreement for immigrants.
Each mixed district would work out for themselves. You might have mixed religious Jews and religious Muslims and Christians in one, or you might have another mixed area which is totally secular, Jews and Palestinians living together.
Yeah.
There could be all kinds of different district types, and each of them should work out what works for them. And as you say, there will be some areas which are purely for religious, ultra religious people, and I respect their right to have that. If they want to, in those towns, live a totally traditional life, and they want to have rules that people need to be modestly dressed if they want to come and visit those towns, I completely respect that. I don't think it's the right of. I'm a secular person, by the way, and I don't feel I have the right to say to any religious town, we have a right to come into your town, dress the way that suits us. We don't have that right. And in the same way, though, they don't have the right to come to our towns and dictate what we do. For example, if we want to have public transport running on the Sabbath, on Shabbat, then in secular towns, that should be permissible. And we're going to have to make sure we reach an agreement on that. Okay, we need to respect each other's way of living, and then there's no problem. As you say, you have different districts operating under different local laws, and then
Yeah,
everybody gets to choose.
it means that there is a contradiction. There is a contradiction between absolute, total individual human rights and collective rights. I mean, it's somehow it's a limitation on the freedom of movement when you can't. I can't ride with my bicycle, my car in Mea Shearim, or so I'm limited. But I
Yes,
respect that.
there are
And I'm not
some.
going to eat my sandwich in front of a Muslim during
Absolutely.
Ramadan in East Jerusalem. It's a kind of respect. So I think most of Israelis and Jews and Arabs agree with that. But there are extremist leftists or extremist rightists that don't want any limitation or either on collective rights or individual rights, and we have to find this balance
Yeah, no, as you say, there
between
will
both.
always be some people who are very ideological and aren't willing to compromise on their principles at all. But my experience is the vast majority of people in this land are happy, would be happy to live and let live if they could get to live their way of life in their towns without being threatened by
Yeah,
anybody else.
yeah.
That is what the vast majority of people, both Israelis and Palestinians, want in this land, and that's what we've got to build here. And then we'll deal with some extremists who might even be criminals that would want to attack this. As I said, we've got to make it strong. We mustn't make it in any way vulnerable to the extremists deliberately blowing it up, so that all of a sudden we then say, oh, look, it can't work, forget it, let's just separate. And we mustn't allow that to happen. We've got to be strong. So in that respect, I agree with you. We need to be like a federation in that respect. We must be strong. Okay, but in other ways, we must be like a confederation where we've got a lot of separateness as well, separate rights. And so we've got to work on the details. And there's plenty of work to be done, but I would suggest that the right thing for us to be doing now is to at least put this idea out there to be discussed, and hopefully at all the levels. And then let's all work together, because while it's only a few of us working on it, we can't necessarily know what all sorts of other people's needs would be. And so the sooner we're talking about it at a grand collective level, the sooner we'll be able to work on actually making it a reality and working out the details to make sure that it would actually work in practice.
And maybe we'll speak about the last hard problem that I can think about is it's Jerusalem and the holy sites,
Okay.
the holy basin in Jerusalem.
I see those
the Temple
as wonderful
Mount,
opportunities.
Haram el Sharif. Yeah.
Okay, I personally see. I have said the vision should be that we live together in this land and we respect each other's rights to pray at holy sites in the form each of us wants to. At the end of the day, we're talking about the three Abrahamic religions. We all worship the same God, and we're all descended at the end of the day from one people. And so one theme that I really like is something that I refer to as Abrahamic federalism, which is the idea that it's not just about federalism, it's also remembering our collective joint heritage, which reminds us why we're all in this land. It's not a coincidence that there are Jews and Muslims and Christians in this land. Okay, those three religions are all descended from our common patriarch Abraham. And if we remember that, then we hopefully can remember that we don't need to be fighting here, and that we're all meant to be here, and we should welcome each other's presence in this land, like I said, as complementary, not contradictory. And in the same way, when Abraham died, and according to the Bible, Ishmael and Isaac came together to bury their father together, I suggest it's time for the Israelites and the Ishmaelites to come together to bury the hatchet here in this holy land and be a light unto the nations of the way things can be. Okay, but it's our job. It's our job to sort out our problems here in this land. And in order to do that, we need to value each other, respect each other, and want to live together in this land. So for me, the existence of those religious sites are actually an opportunity, a reminder of why we're here and how we need to respect everybody's rights here in this land to pray at those religious sites. It's a wonderful, it's an amazing, unique land we live in, and we should feel blessed to live here, whether we're religious or secular. It's a wonderful land, and we should enjoy it all together.
Yeah, you know, I think we have in common this idea that God is the Lord, God is the King, and if we can't accept Jews and Palestinians, which means the three Abrahamic religions, if we can't accept the same sovereign, supranational sovereign politically, it means that we are not recognizing really the Lord of the universe as our God. I mean, that the secular political aspect of this idea. And it's a big responsibility, I think, upon Jews and Arabs here in Israel, between Christians, Muslims, and Jews, that if we don't agree together, I don't accept one common law and sovereignty upon us, that will mean that we are not really recognizing the same God. We are just using nationalism for using religion for our own nationalism, and it doesn't it make our religions lose their any credibility, I think. So it's very very important, and I see that this idea of federal state and supranational federalism as very meaningful for religious people, okay, and having a meaning. So because then if we agree upon the fact that Jerusalem will be the federal capital, then it won't belong to the Jews, it won't belong to the Arabs, it won't belong to the Christians, it will belong to the federation, to the federal sovereign above us. And it will really give Jerusalem its real meaning, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jerusalem, I think both peoples agree that should be the capital city. It's the holy city. This is the Holy Land. And yes, the three Abrahamic religions absolutely need to see each other as brethren and welcome each other's presence in this land. And therefore, yes, as I said, we all worship the same God. Therefore, those religions need to be proud to stand alongside each other here in this holy land. But I want to make it clear that, as I said, I'm secular, okay, and I do not feel that it's a requirement of every person in this land to, in order to be part of this vision, to embrace God, embrace religion of one kind or the other. There's no requirement whatsoever for that to happen. We're simply saying that for the religious people, they need to be part of a bigger vision, okay, that this is the Holy Land that does not belong to one religion or the other, of any of those three. It belongs to all of us, and that includes the secular members of each of those peoples. And so everybody is free to follow whichever religion they want, or not to follow any religion if they choose not to. If they want to choose a secular life, totally free to do that as well. So let's be clear, we're not going to be building some kind of theocracy in some way here. Okay, this is something where each people gets to live according to their rules and principles and ideals.
I agree absolutely.
Okay,
Even if
wonderful.
I don't define myself as secular, not exactly as religious either, but not as secular. And I think there is a room for humanistic philosophy and for religious philosophies in different religions. Um, in the end, those are different aspects of the same thing, or different languages. And it's important to speak in these different voices and different languages. It is maybe the federalistic language. To be able to speak different languages and use different terminologies for the
Definitely.
same project. That's why
Absolutely.
we are different groups. We are different associations and groups in the same federalist movement we are building now. We are building Israeli Palestinian movement, and we have meetings between Israeli Jews and Palestinians from Israel and from the territories. And hopefully it will become bigger.
Absolutely. I hope anybody that sees what we're talking about today and what we're going to talk about in the future wants to become part of it and become part of the debate and part of building it, because it's a vision with hope. And I think there's a real need for that in this land at the moment. There's a lot of people who've given up and just don't believe that there's ever going to be peace in this land. And it's a shame, because I think it's very possible to have peace in this land. I would even go so far as to say it's inevitable that in the end we will sort this out. But I would really like that we do it sooner rather than later. And we've got an opportunity to do that now. There's people are asking, okay, what are we going to do now? So let's put this out there and let's start discussing it. And hopefully then we can actually all start working together to make it happen.
Yes, Phil. Because in our meetings, we see that there is no conflict at the individual level between Jews and Arabs here, and between Israelis and Palestinians in general. The conflict is more at the political level, at the nationalistic level, by fears that are developed on each side, and a lot of fantasies too. And the past has taught us that things can turn very bad. So there's a lack of trust, and we have to work on that.
Yeah,
but
we need
hopefully,
to build hope and belief instead of fear and despair and distrust. I've seen amazing things in the area where I live, where things have changed dramatically for the better by working together. And if it's possible in this area, and I'm talking about between Israelis and Palestinians, and if we can do it here, I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it in the entire land. But as you say, there's got to be political will as well. A lot of people on the ground are open to any possibilities that would just give them the quality of life that they're looking for and the freedoms and they. I've heard people say 1 state, 2 states, 10 states doesn't matter as long as we get to live the way we want to live. So yeah, we've got to open that up and get it to the political level as well, because there's been a lot of stuckness. We've basically been stuck to a particular paradigm, and we need to open that up. And I would suggest a lot of the reason is actually the international community that they believe fundamentally that the solution has to be 2 states, because that's the approach they've taken elsewhere in other parts of the world when there are conflicts. And maybe it was right, maybe. Okay, but what we're saying here in this land is that is not the solution that works for us here. One story I heard, which I'll just quote to it, maybe in this, is the story of King Solomon and the baby. The mother that truly loves the baby doesn't want the baby cut in two. That's the lesson of that story. And if we truly love this land, we don't want to cut it into two. That's not what we want here in this land. it would be a tragedy, and it would. I call it a lose-lose. We wouldn't, even if we did and we separated. Then who's to say that we would have friendly relations with between the two states? Some people say, okay, we'll do two states, but there'll be open borders. But the problem is, if it's two totally separate states, as I said, it's far too easy that at the first sign of trouble, that we just decide, that's it, and we're separating, and then we build a great big wall. We don't want to open that possibility.
And there are people that want to make troubles. We are not lacking of extremists.
Exactly. And so we need to make sure whatever we build is going to be robust and strong, so that the spoilers, we want to include the spoilers as much as possible, by the way. Bring them in. Yeah. Okay, if we can. We've talked about bringing, making things fine for religious people and for secular people. Okay, there's no reason why the vast majority of people shouldn't want to be part of this vision if we build it correctly. But as you say, there will always be some people with other interests that aren't interested in peace. And so we've got to be strong and stand together against people that would want to spoil that vision of a prosperous, happy future for all of us and for generations to come. Okay,
Phil, I enjoyed speaking with you. I think we spoke about many aspects of Israeli-Palestinian federalism, the one we promote, and all different versions close to it. So maybe another time we'll speak about your own experience between Palestinian village and settlements and where you live. To get down now to the micro level.
Yeah. I'd be happy to talk about the steps that we took in this area to change the reality from one where Israelis and Palestinians totally distrusted each other. The second Intifada was a total disconnection, and we've managed to move past that and turn the clock back. But it didn't happen overnight. You have to make changes and build confidence and build a win-win for everybody to want to work together again. And that's what we did. And now we've reached a stage where in this area, it looks like there's no risk of ever going back because people have got too much to lose now. And that's what can be done. And that's what you have
already done the federation. We have already done the federation at the local level.
In a
small example.
Exactly.
A small example.
A small pilot project.
But
exactly.
It's a proof of concept. It's doable. Yeah.
Exactly.
Proof of concept. Exactly.
Okay. So until next time. Thank you very much.
Happy New Year and see you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.